Finding peace. Adam was allowed phone calls during his time locked away, and at first, they were all that kept him sane. If it hadn't been for Charlie's words of comfort and encouragement floating through the speaker for 5 minutes a week, Adam didn't know if he'd still have been alive by the time he finally began to understand Bruno's way of thinking. As much as Adam tried to ignore him, Bruno's words had managed to wedge themselves so tightly in Adam's mind that they hung around long after Bruno's sentence was over. In the beginning, Adam had viewed it as an infection. Bruno's thoughts swarmed among Adam's, devouring them, becoming them. Those thoughts affected his actions. He talked to others more, he smiled more, laughed more. He started treating himself better, then wondered why, because surely he didn't deserve it. And then that thought would be devoured too, and the cycle continued. Charlie could hear it in Adam's voice. He'd never said so, but Adam could tell by the way Charlie spoke to him, no longer as if Adam was a wild animal, but as if Adam was a friend he couldn't wait to see once his sentence was over. That long-awaited day came upon him suddenly. In a haze, Adam left the place he'd been forced to call home for the last year and walked side by side with Deborah as she led him to where she'd parked her car. "How are you feeling?" asked Deborah. Adam paused, trying to find the answer. "Older," he said finally. Deborah laughed. "Is it a good thing or a bad thing?" "A good thing," said Adam. "I feel like I'm not such a little kid anymore." Deborah smiled as she rummaged through her handbag for her car keys. "That's good. Less than greater than." They climbed into her car and began the long drive back to the orphanage. Adam stared out the window, watching the scenery flash past, savoring his first moments of freedom. "Did they treat you well?" asked Deborah. Adam nodded without looking away from the outside world. "Well enough. It wasn't a hotel, after all." "That's true. Well, now that you're free, what's something fun you'd like to do?" "I don't know," said Adam, finally tearing his gaze away from the window to look at her. "Something that doesn't involve sitting in a locked room or cleaning up graffiti." Deborah chuckled softly. "How about a picnic with all your friends? Does that sound good?" Adam smiled and nodded, then looked back out the window. When they arrived at the orphanage, Adam was greeted with enthusiasm by the 4 younger boys. Charlie crash-tackled him the moment Adam walked through the front door, sending him stumbling backwards into Deborah, and the other boys piled on behind Charlie. "Whoa, careful, boys," said Deborah, pressing her hands against Adam's back to stop the 5 of them from tumbling to the ground. "Sorry, Debbie," said Charlie, and the boys backed off. "It's just so good to see you again, Adam. We've missed you so much." "What was it like?" asked Henry. "Was it scary? Were there fights every day? Was the food terrible?" "The food was awful, but there weren't many fights," Adam replied. "Did you win the fights?" asked Mitchell. "You did, didn't you? I've heard so much about you. You could win any fight," said the 5th boy enthusiastically. Adam stared at him in shock. It wasn't because of his appearance, dark hair, dark eyes, about Mitchell's age, it was simply the fact that he was there, and he was new. A new child at the orphanage meant 2 more innocent people dead, and there was nothing Adam could do about it. "What's your name?" Adam choked out. "Dane Henderson." "When did you get here?" "Months ago." Adam's throat closed. His chest felt too tight. He shut his eyes to stop the tears burning behind him from falling. Adam shook his head in despair, opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling, blinking hard to beat the tears back. Without a word, he climbed the stairs beside him, heading for his bedroom. "Was it something I said?" asked Dane, his apologetic voice following Adam down the upstairs hallway. As the bedroom door swung shut behind him, Bruno's words filled Adam's head once again. "When life happens, it's just an event. The only thing that changes is the way you view it. What had inevitably happened to Dane's parents was just an event. Of course, it was a devastating one for them, but Adam wasn't them. As cold and uncaring as it sounded, that event had no effect on him other than bringing a new friend into his life. That was the way he chose to view it, so that was his reality. With that thought in mind, all his feelings of guilt, sadness and regret drifted away, leaving only calm and contentment in their place. The tears that had been threatening to fall subsided. The tightness in his chest released and he could breathe again. His throat opened, allowing him to speak just in time to tell whoever was knocking on the door behind him to come in. Adam stepped out of the way as Charlie entered, closing the door gently behind him. "Are you okay, Adam?" he asked. The older boy nodded. "Yeah, I'm all right. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Dane. I knew you'd worry about him, but there was nothing new." Adam held up a hand to silence Charlie. "Don't worry about it. You did the right thing." "Now," Adam said brightly, clapping his hands together, a habit he must have picked up from Bruno. "Deb mentioned something about a picnic on the way here." Charlie's eyes lit up at both the prospect of a picnic and at how well Adam was handling the situation. "That sounds awesome. Picnic." The 6 children piled into the back of Deborah's large car. Ashley and Alyssa had turned 18 during Adam's imprisonment and so had left the orphanage. Riley claimed the front passenger's seat. Henry, Mitchell and Dane sat in the middle, and Charlie and Adam sat in the very back seats with a picnic basket resting across their laps. Outdoor toys littered the floor of the car: soccer balls, frisbees, skipping ropes, and the stereo system filled it with the steady beat of the music it played. The volume of the music kept changing as Deborah and Riley battled over the volume control. As soon as Riley turned it up, Deborah turned it down, so Riley turned it up further, so Deborah turned it down further. Eventually, Deborah turned it off entirely, only to have it replaced by a chorus of groans and complaints from the children in the car. She gave in and turned it back on but warned Riley that she wouldn't be allowed to sit in the front on the way home if she turned it up again. Riley compensated for this by singing along at the top of her voice. She was soon joined by the boys behind her. Deborah sighed and shook her head, but after a little encouragement from the children, she joined in too. When they reached the park, they set up their picnic blanket and laid out the food, protecting it with mesh covers from the inevitable flies that would try to land on it. They chatted and laughed as they ate. Mitchell took a drink at the wrong moment and almost sprayed apple juice out of his nose. Then they split into teams of 3 for a game of soccer. There were no soccer goals set up, so they marked their own goals with 2 of the skipping ropes they'd brought, arranging them in semicircles in the grass. The teams faced each other on the field: Adam, Charlie and Dane versus Riley, Henry and Mitchell, and placed the ball between them. Then the game began. It was more fun than Adam remembered, perhaps because he hadn't played for so long, or because he had a team member to pass the ball to without him having to abandon their post as goalie. Less than greater than. Adam didn't really care what the reason was, he just enjoyed the game. Yes, Adam cried as Charlie scored the final goal of the game, bringing the score up just enough for their team to win. Then his face fell. He glanced at Riley, waiting for a negative reaction, but none came. "Well done," she congratulated Charlie. Charlie grinned at her. "Thanks." Adam walked over to him and asked quietly, "What happened?" "I thought Riley was a really sore loser." "She's grown up a lot since you left," Charlie replied as the 2 of them walked slowly towards the middle of the field, along with the others. "I don't know. Something about you getting in so much trouble, then the twins leaving too. I think reality hit her and she realized that she needed to grow up a bit. She couldn't keep bossing us around forever. She had to learn to get along with people, and she has." Adam smiled. "That's good to hear. When they reached the others in the middle of the field, the group decided to pack up the soccer stuff and play frisbee next. This time, they convinced Deborah to join them, though not without some difficulty. "I'm terrible at catching those things. I'll spoil your game," she insisted, looking up at him from where she sat stubbornly on the picnic blanket. "You won't spoil it," said Riley, trying to heave Deborah to her feet by tugging on her arms. "Come on, it'll be fun." "Are you sure?" asked Deborah, still refusing to move. "I think you'll have more fun without me dropping the frisbee all the time." "We'll all drop it at some point," Riley reasoned. "Especially Mitchell." Mitchell looked around at the sound of his name, his innocent eyes wide. "Me?" "Yes, you." "Why me?" "You're a clown," Riley said with a lopsided shrug. "Clowns are clumsy. Come on, Deb, up you get." Finally, Deborah allowed herself to be pulled to her feet. The 7 of them stood in a wide circle and threw a frisbee around, and Deborah discovered she was better at it than she'd thought. After a short while, Adam decided to throw a second frisbee into the mix, then a third, and a fourth, and then there were no more spares to add. Frisbees flew in all directions. Shrieks and laughter erupted from those who got hit in the arm with one frisbee while trying to catch another. The game was chaos, and Adam loved it.